All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we are unpacking two seriously chilling case studies drawn from recent supernatural source material. Today, we're exploring hauntings that weren't just random acts of paranormal chaos, but direct, terrifying consequences triggered by profound human mistakes. If you've ever wondered how the unseen world reacts to our everyday choices, you are absolutely in the right place. We'll be breaking down the timelines, the psychology behind the hauntings, and the deeply rooted cultural rituals used to restore balance.
We're kicking things off with a really unsettling quote from our first case file. Translated from Hindi, it reads, "If I were your girlfriend, I'd be so sad. I would make someone else my boyfriend for the rest of my life." This was spoken by a young student named Kritika. Now, the context here is what makes it truly terrifying. Kritika didn't say this to a living person. She said it as a flippant, completely foolish joke to a freshly dug grave while taking a shortcut home. I mean, picture the setting. It's late, it's dark, the vibe is already incredibly tense. To her, it was just an innocent, albeit edgy joke. But in the realm of the paranormal, words have immense power, and she literally unknowingly invited a vengeful spirit straight into her life.
So, that brings us to our first section, the fear of unknown shadows and that one dangerous shortcut. This entire nightmare begins with something so universal, the fear of the dark and the temptation to just take a shortcut to get home faster. Kritika and her friend Ria were simply trying to get back from a late-night tutoring session, but that single choice set off a completely terrifying chain reaction. The escalation here is strictly linear. It starts innocently enough with step 1, the graveyard shortcut, but almost immediately, boom, we're at step 2. The source notes Kritika started getting these incredibly creepy phone calls from a mysterious boy, his voice just echoing through the receiver, promising he was going to be with her forever. Then step 3 hits. Terrifying, vivid nightmares begin to plague her sleep, totally draining her sanity. And finally, the whole thing culminates in step 4, physical fainting and full-blown possession. This is where the spirit straight up declares that since she offered him love and death, she belongs to him now.
Moving on to section 2, the stubborn spirit of James. We really have to ask the critical question here. Who exactly was haunting Kritika?
Well, the source material reveals a pretty dark truth about that freshly dug grave. It belonged to a boy named James. And James wasn't just some random lonely ghost passing through. He was a deeply troubled, wayward, and incredibly stubborn individual. In life, his behavior was wildly toxic. He actually died in a frantic accident while trying to flee the scene after harassing another young girl. So the crucial takeaway is that his aggressive, obsessive personality didn't just end when his heart stopped beating. It carried right over into the afterlife. Kritika's misguided joke? That just gave him the exact opening he needed to latch on to a brand new victim.
Which leads us right into Father Evan's struggle and the exorcism.
Look, to combat a spirit this aggressive, your standard, ordinary interventions just aren't going to cut it. So, an expert named Father Evans was called in specifically from Ranchi. What's fascinating is that Father Evans doesn't just wing it. He uses a highly structured methodology. Step 1 is absolutely crucial. He first objectively assesses if Kritika is just experiencing stress-induced hallucinations or if there's a genuine supernatural presence. Once he confirms the spirit is real, he moves to step 2, invoking his faith and directly demanding the demon to show itself. But Step 3 is where the real psychological warfare happens. He forces Kritika to verbally and explicitly reject James. She has to actively scream out her hatred for him, literally taking back the emotional power she accidentally gave him at the grave. Finally, in Step 4, he successfully banishes the entity with holy prayers.
Now, this sets up a really fascinating contrast for us. On one hand, we have James, who is essentially a complete stranger, driven by toxic obsession, just latching on to a passing comment. But our next entity, Megha, she is an entirely different story. She is not a stranger, making a random, opportunistic attack. No, she is driven by the deepest, most personal human betrayal you can imagine, and she is striking back from beyond the grave with laser-focused intent.
And that takes us into our second case file, focusing on Rizwan's terrible, fatal betrayal. The anatomy of Rizwan's betrayal is like watching a slow-motion car crash that systematically builds to a heartbreaking tragedy. Step 1. Rizwan marries Megha, a Hindu woman, entirely against his Muslim family's wishes. Step 2. He takes a lucrative job in the Gulf, but continuously makes excuses, flat out refusing to secure a family visa for her. He effectively abandons her to live with his deeply hostile parents. Step 3. Pushed to the absolute brink by his endless deceit and the sheer cruelty of her in-laws, Megha tragically takes her own life.
and because of her religion and the nature of her death, she is denied a proper burial and is secretly, totally disrespectfully, buried out in the jungle. Then we hit step 4, which is the match that lights the powder keg. Rizwan comes back home and immediately marries a new woman, Farina.
Before her death, Megha left Rizwan with these final, haunting words on the phone. Translated, they mean, "I will make your condition so bad that you will regret it for the rest of your life." What's so vital to understand here is that this was not just an emotional threat from a heartbroken person. Actually, given her tragic end, the immense betrayal she suffered, and that improper burial, this statement morphed into a literal karmic promise. So, what happens next? Well, we enter the phase of the second wife and the absolute terror that follows. But here is the crazy twist. The immediate consequences didn't actually fall on Rizwan. The terror fell squarely on his totally innocent new bride, Farina, who had absolutely zero idea that Megha even existed. The spirit strategically attacks the very symbols of Farina's new marriage. I mean, her wedding dress spontaneously bursts into flames and burns to ashes right in front of her eyes. She starts mysteriously finding sindoor and a bindi, these traditional sacred Hindu symbols of a married woman that belong to Megha, just appearing out of nowhere in her new home. This is incredibly heavy cultural imagery designed to show exactly who the rightful wife was. Farina actually faints from the sheer terror of seeing Megha's spirit manifesting, and she begins experiencing this sudden, blinding physical pain. Megha is making her presence known, and she's sending a crystal-clear message. This new marriage is cursed.
With things spiraling out of control, we move to unfulfilled hope and the Narayan Bali ritual.
Because Farina's life is now in immediate danger, and the haunting is rapidly escalating, Rizwan's family consults a guru to figure out what on earth they can do. The guru explains it perfectly. Because Megha died by suicide, and because she was denied a proper burial according to her own Hindu customs, her soul is trapped in this state of immense, agonizing anger. So the guru mandates the Narayan Bali Puja. This is a super intense, highly specific nighttime ritual designed exclusively for souls who have suffered an unnatural, unresolved death. In this specific situation, it is literally the only viable way to grant her peace and sever her dark tie to the living world.
But performing this ritual isn't just about standing back and safely chanting prayers. It forces a terrifying question. Can Rizwan actually stand there and face the physical manifestation of his own overwhelming guilt? The climax of this case study is just incredibly tense. Right in the middle of this dark, smoke-filled nighttime ritual, Megha's spirit actually physically manifests right in front of him. And she doesn't just attack violently, she plays a devastating psychological game. She pleads with Rizwan to remember their love, begging him to step away from the holy circle and stop the puja entirely. She tries everything to manipulate his deep-seated guilt, forcing him into a really terrifying psychological corner. But the guru explicitly warns Rizwan that if he takes even one single step out of that protective circle, he is going to be lost forever. Rizwan has to hold firm, swallow the massive guilt of his betrayal, and complete the ritual with her ashes just to save his new family. Okay, let's pull back for a second. As we wrap up this explainer, there are a few absolute key takeaways we need to grab from these case studies. First off, words matter. Disrespecting the dead, even as a silly teenager's passing joke, just invites absolute disaster. Second, human betrayal creates real karma that can literally follow you beyond a grave. Third, as we saw clearly with both Kritika and Rizwan, conquering your own personal fear and guilt is step number 1 to defeating any dark entity. And finally, it's just really fascinating to see how highly structured spiritual traditions, regardless of the specific faith, offer these powerful, proven frameworks for restoring balance to the unseen world. Which leaves me with a final thought I really want you to chew on. In both of these stories, totally ordinary human actions, a flippant joke at a graveyard, a selfish lie to a spouse, they rippled out into horrifying supernatural consequences. If every single action has a consequence that can follow you or even your loved ones beyond the grave, what unseen debts might you be creating right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I will definitely catch you next time.